Good afternoon, everyone. We are glad to welcome you to our panel discussion, Surviving Uncertainty and Cyber Threats in a Global Business, the case of Infopulse. My name is Natalia, and I will be the host of today's event. It's really nice to see participants from different parts of Europe. We are glad to welcome you. It's not news that we are now in the time of worldwide cyber war. And I truly believe that the presentation of our highly competent speakers today will help you start the path to victory in this cyber war. Let me clarify some organizational points and we will start. First of all participants are in a mute mode. We welcome you to ask questions. For this, please use block chat or questions on the right, and at the end of the event, speakers will answer your questions. The webinar is being recorded, and we will share both the recording and presentation materials, most likely during this week. If you have any additional questions after the event, please write to us and we will redirect your question to our expert and answer as soon as possible. I believe that's all from my side, and I'm happy to pass the word to our first speaker and event moderator, Glenn Zygmunt-Witerski. Glenn, please.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar focused on surviving uncertainty and cyber threats in today's business world. We are going to present an actual case study as it evolved here at Infopulse, and we will closely examine what a business continuity plan is and why it is important to your organization. Here is a quick look at our agenda for today. We've broken it down into 4 parts, and there will be a question and answer session afterwards. And also now let me introduce you to our Infopulse team for today's webinar. My name is Glenn Zygmunt-Witerski. I'm an engagement manager with Infopulse, and I'll be your moderator for today's presentation. With me, we have Oleksandr Pronkin. He is the Chief Information Officer at Infopulse. We have Vadim Popov. He is one of our enterprise cloud architects. And last but not least, we have Konstantin Lozinski, who is an expert in security. Just a quick introduction to who and what Infopulse is. We are one of the largest IT companies in Europe with over 30 years of experience. We have over 230 active clients across 40 countries, not only in Europe, but in the United States and the Far East as well. And we also have more than 2,300 specialists, with 60% of our specialists having more than 6 years of experience in the industry. As an organization focused on providing first-class consulting and engineering services, we've achieved a number of prestigious awards and certifications. 2 of these awards we're extremely proud of. In 2019, we were Microsoft Partner of the Year, Ukraine, and we are especially proud of our Microsoft Azure Expert MSP certification. This certification was awarded to only 104 partners worldwide out of 400,000 participants. This is an incredible 0.026% of all participants. So this is an award we worked for very hard, and we're very proud of it. Infopulse also has an extensive partner ecosystem. Here's a short snapshot of some of our current technology partners. So let's take a deeper look at the purpose of a business continuity plan. In general, a BCP focuses on mitigating risk due to interruptions to your normal business, and a BCP focuses on risks that can neither be managed nor controlled. And when we talk about managed nor controlled, we're talking about infrastructure failures, we're talking about cyber attacks or intrusions, and even weather or environmental disasters. Unfortunately, Infopulse has experienced this firsthand, as you're well aware that Ukraine is currently in conflict with Russia. Kind of an interesting statistic that I wanted to bring to your attention. In a recent study by Mercer's, it is interesting to note that after surveying 300 businesses across 37 countries, 51% of these businesses do not have a business continuity plan at all, and only 23.8% of the businesses surveyed are in the process of developing a plan. That leaves an amazing 26% of all companies with no plan at all, and they risk serious business interruptions due to outside forces. As an enterprise level company, Infopulse is required to have a business continuity plan in place, which would enable the company to quickly respond to risks and operational challenges. In 2016, the Infopulse management team decided to kick off the preparation and rollout of a company-wide BCP. A solid disaster recovery plan was the first major step in the development of this business continuity process. Here at Infopulse, we used a multi-phased approach to implementing our BCP, which we called Disaster Recovery Plan version 1 and 2. Version 1 consisted of identifying our most critical production systems and backing them up to our European data centers. Version 2 is an extension of version 1. In this follow-on phase, it was decided to extend the backups to also include the project environment and cloud components. Altogether, this would enable data safety across the entire company. The Infopulse BCP team made significant progress while testing the backup platform for 3 consecutive years. In January 2022, the team achieved a 100% score with all the systems launched and fully functional. In the next 2 slides, we'll take a look at these phases in more detail. In 2019, we started testing the email system with a plan to shift it to Exchange Online as we realized the strategic necessity to move to the cloud or hybrid environment. This provided us with secure cloud-based mailboxes with 100 gigabytes of storage per user, along with a web interface allowing for an anywhere, anytime access for all of our 2,000 plus users. We replaced Skype for Business with Microsoft Teams. This was the next step in the migration that started in 2020. Now the migration process is 100% complete. Skype for Business was replaced by Microsoft Teams with our telephony hub, which is integrated with the latter through session border control to orchestrate telecom providers integration. We migrated Infopulse's intranet and departmental pages for a worldwide availability of 24/7 when we moved from SharePoint to SharePoint Online. And with our data center encryption, this added additional security, which is a core requirement when applying for certain certifications or going through partnership audits. We moved our current rights management center to Azure Information Protection. This allowed Infopulse to have all the company documents protected and secured. Now the global team of Infopulse no longer needs on-premises infrastructure to work with the documents. We moved our current websites to the cloud. This reduced our on-premises footprint and allowed for hardware cost reduction. Worldwide availability 24/7 is now possible. We moved our current Team Foundation server to Azure DevOps service. And this platform consisted of 2 parts, an on-premises part and a cloud DevOps service. This allowed for full code versioning and change management, full CI/CD support. Aside from these items, we also realized significant benefits in a couple of other areas. We improved the management of user workstations through the use of Defender for Endpoint, Antivirus Cloud Shift, RMS, and Microsoft Intune. More than 75% of Infopulse's local specialists that were relocated to safe locations outside of their normal workplace experienced 0 interruption to critical business systems as a result of the successful migration. And last but not least, as of April 2022, more than 90% of our experts perform their regular duties, regardless of whether they're working on-site, in the office, or remotely. I would now like to hand over our discussion to our resident enterprise cloud architect, Vadim Popov, who will present an Azure Business Continuity Disaster Recovery Review. Popov?
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you. I will be start. Today is a difficult time. A lot of companies every day receive some IT cybersecurity threats. As example, DDoS attacks, phishing attacks, ransomware attacks. Because of that, business need resiliency. And in our customers, we have two scenarios. First scenario, if customer fully migrated to cloud technologies as Azure, and of course, if company work as public cloud technologies in Azure, company must understand how company can improve business continuously or data recovery. And second scenario, a lot of companies continuous work on-premise or have, as we said, hybrid cloud infrastructure. A lot of applications, a lot of systems work on-premise, work on multi-cloud. And because of that, company must have strategy for business continuously planning. And in my short presentation, I will talk about topical BCP scenarios on Azure and on-premise and Azure. Glenn, show the next slide, please. This slide presented possible DR, data recovery and business continuity planning technologies if basic company infrastructure work on Azure. First, if we use Azure virtual machines, this virtualization and Microsoft protect server racks, and if, for example, problem is hardware, this virtual machine automatically quicker started without interruption another hardware. But if we want increase SLA, Microsoft strictly recommend to use premium SSD disk, and if we use Azure Virtual Machine with Azure Premium SSD disks, we receive SLA 99.9%. Second scenario, if our system in Azure, we build software cluster for our system, and we expect and want protect of hardware failure, for example, all server rack issue. And what we can do? Azure provides Azure availability sets technology, and we have possibility locate our, for example, web service virtual machines to availability sets, and because of that availability sets physically different servers racks in one data center. And if we have an issue with one server racks, another server racks works and our system works. Second scenario, a lot of companies said, okay, difficult time, and we want protect from all data center issues. Okay, no problem. Azure provide technology, Azure availability zones. What is this? Some different data centers in one Azure region located as metropolitan area network. We have presentation different data center in one region as Azure availability zones. And if we want, we can locate our virtual machines by different availability zones, and if we receive issues with Azure Data Center, our virtual machines from another availability zones still work. And of course, second scenarios, if we have requirement protect our infrastructure from entire region of failure, for example, natural disaster and other problems, we can use Azure Site Recovery technologies and databases replication technologies by database vendors and replicate transactions and replicate virtual machine to, for example, neighbors region or another region. Classical scenarios, for example, if we host our infrastructure West Europe Azure region, we can use North Europe Azure region as a secondary site. It's work, and Azure provide all necessary services for implement this. And availability sets provide SLA 95%, and availability zone present more good SLA 99.99%. Also, Azure provide good service Azure backup, and if we use this service, we can make backups of virtual machine databases as Azure SQL database or SAP HANA database, file shares, and another scenarios. And very interesting and very important, because currently a lot of cybersecurity attacks provide ransomware and provide crash infrastructure scenarios. We must have protected backup. And in this slide presented reason why we can do backup: prevention accidental data loss, prevention data corruption, protect from ransomware, and of course, administrator problems and administrator issues. And Azure Backup Service provides possibility to protect backups, for example, SAP, encrypt backups, or use immutable storage. Very interesting scenarios. We can write backup once, and after that, we can read backups, but we can change and delete this backup by necessary time. And if we use Azure as a basic infrastructure, we have possibility increase data recovery and create necessary business continuously planning strategy. Please show the next, Glenn, show next slide, please. Second scenario: if company work on premise or have hybrid cloud infrastructure, and very interesting, during these 4 months, we support a lot of Ukrainian companies of creating these BCP scenarios because company have on-premise infrastructure. This infrastructure work, but we have a risk. If we have crash of on-premise infrastructure, company must work. And in this slide, typical DR architecture. First, if we have infrastructure on-premise or another cloud, in this case, on-premise infrastructure. First, we must create site-to-site VPN or express route between on-premise and Azure. After that, our local network can communicate with local network and Azure. And for disaster domain, we can install additional domain controller in Azure, and these domain controllers receive Active Directory replication and we have a copy our Active Directory in public cloud in Azure. Next scenario, if we have databases providing system, for example, SAP HANA or Microsoft SQL Server or another Oracle Server, for example, we can use replication technologies from vendor. For example, we create virtual machine or machines in Azure because these machines can communicate with on-premise machine via site-to-site VPN or Express Route. Next, we can enable database replication. For example, for Microsoft SQL service, we can use SQL Server always on technology. This technology can work with asynchronous mode and can provide finished transaction from on-premise to Azure SQL Server virtual machine. And we have synchronized consistent copy of our productive databases in Azure. For subsystem, SAP HANA provides SAP HANA system replication, also can work synchronous and asynchronous mode, and we can receive transactions to Azure, and this virtual machine or machines work as database server and receive consistent transaction from on-premise. For another service, if services can't have requirement transaction consistency, for example, application services, web services, and other services, not database services, we can use Azure technology as named Azure Site Recovery. Azure Site Recovery provides possibility work with on-premise physical service, VMware virtual machines, Hyper-V virtual machines, and can create first copy of this service or virtual machines to Azure with conversion, and after that we can enable continuous replication, and periodically Azure Site Recovery make snapshot or changes of these virtual machines, for example, and replicate to Azure. And if we receive problems to on-premise data centers, first we must start button failover, and Azure Site Recovery System enable and start the copy virtual machine copies on Azure. And second step, we must set as a primary our databases virtual machine, and after that all system continuous work. This is maybe basic scenario for our time and for our customers. Also different scenarios for file service, because a lot of customers didn't go to file, didn't migrate file services to SharePoint Online, and have had a lot of file services with a lot of folders, difficult folders infrastructure, difficult permission infrastructure. Microsoft provide two interesting services. First, Azure File Share. We can possibility create Azure File Share and connect this. It's software service. It's platform. It's not server. We have a public share and can connect this public share to internal network. And if we use Azure File Sync services, we can sync all file services from on-premise data to Azure File Share. And we receive consistent copy from on-premise file service to Azure. And if we want migrate, we can reconnect to Azure File Share. If we work as DR scenarios, we can use Azure File Service in failover site. Go and show next slide, please. Also, we have interesting questions from customers who work with VMware virtualization infrastructure. Very interesting. Currently, Microsoft provides two possible scenarios for migration from VMware or creating BCP scenarios with VMware. First scenarios have names Azure VMware Solution. Very, very interesting. Microsoft provides native VMware host in Azure. And if we use native VMware host in Azure, we can connect these hosts to company VMware WebSphere management system. Of course, we can create site-to-site VPN or express route with Azure and on-prem, but if we have network connection, we can see this Azure VMware host as VMware host and can manage this VMware host from VMware native system. And of course, in this system, we can enable this virtual machine, replicate or migrate to Azure VMware host. It's very, very interesting scenario, and its scenario can enable quicker migration from VMware system or implement BCP scenarios for VMware. But if we don't want to use native VMware infrastructure solution, we have Azure Site Recovery. Azure Site Recovery can provide possibility install VMware virtual machine have name configuration server. This configuration server will connect to local VMware infrastructure and connect to Azure and work as gateway. This system managed from Azure and configuration server provide discover task and replication and conversion task. If we choose virtual machines VMware, this virtual machine converted to Azure format and receive continuous replication, and we have shutdown VMs on Azure, and if we want, we can migrate or we can choose failover. Very interesting after fail, if this temporary failover time and we want to came back to on-prem infrastructure, we can do this. Azure Site Recovery, as I speak before, provide failover scenarios not only VMware for system center virtual machine centers or Hyper-V clusters or physical service. And it's work for creating secondary site scenario, and as a secondary site, we can use Azure. And last slide, please, Glenn. Sorry. And of course, we can use this site recovery scenario, not only VMware, on-premise physical service. And please show next slide. And next. And because we receive a lot of questions about SAP ERP system, we have currently successfully finished project about not only migration SAP to Azure. It's very interesting. Microsoft and SAP provide certified Azure virtual machine and recommended infrastructure, and SAP can work on Azure as a native system, and also we can create BCP scenarios if main SAP ERP system works in Azure. So, for example, we can use two virtual machines with SAP HANA and use synchronous HANA system replication with after failover. It's working from on-premise, and if we want to receive additional SAP ERP, SAP HANA copy on Azure, our strategy is this. We create communication channel, site-to-site VPN or express route with Azure, and on-premise data center, implement certified virtual machine for SAP HANA, and in SAP HANA console, we can enable asynchronous SAP HANA system replication, and it's work. And we have on Azure synthetic copy of our database. Thank you for attention. If we have questions, please write this question on our chat. And thank you, Glenn. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Vadim. So now that we've had a chance to look at what a business continuity plan is and how it relates to disaster recovery, let us now look at the final topic of our webinar, cyber threats and cybersecurity. So to help put things in context, the global cost of cybercrime in 2021 was estimated at $6 trillion US. In addition to the hard costs, there are the intangibles like damage to reputation, theft of intellectual property, and lawsuits. These soft costs are much harder to estimate, but in fact can easily exceed the hard costs. So in the next several slides, we will present some of the more common cyber threat risk scenarios, how to mitigate them, and how to verify their implementation. So at this time, I would like to hand over our discussion to our resident security expert, Konstantin Lazinski.
Thank you, Glenn. First of all, I would like to tell that cybersecurity, it's the place that can start your BCP process. Like if something happened, you start using your BCP. And of course, while using your BCP, when it is implemented, a new cybersecurity threats can be shown in your infrastructure. Let's walk through a few of them, through a few examples that we saw at our clients that they are faced with, and how they should do, what they should do to mitigate them, and what a good BCP plan have to do to mitigate these risks before they happened. First risk that I would like to tell you about is backups. While breaching infrastructure, attackers first of all trying to reach your backups, try to erase them or try to modify them so they won't be usable at all. So after the breach, you won't have the possibility to recover your infrastructure from those backups, and all IT services or even all the business will stop. So how to mitigate this risk? First of all, you have to understand how they are conducted, how those backups are done in your infrastructure, what is the locations of the backups, what are the permissions, and of course it have to be modified so the backups will be stored in a safe place so no one can reach them from typical LAN or from servers LAN. Typically it's good to store your backup servers in separate network, which is isolated from main networks, and it's managed from like separated domains even. The better approach is to store your backups in a cold storage, like on tapes, which are stored somewhere also in a safe place or even in geographically distributed places. How to verify that you mitigate this risk? There are a few approaches. One of them is to conduct assessment or just to involve a security experts to analyze how backups are conducted. Is it safe to use in enterprise? What are the risks and so on? And the second approach is to conduct a pen test. A pen test to your backup infrastructure, and it will outline all the problems that you have at the moment. And of course, monitoring. your SOC team have to understand how backups are conducted, what are the critical points, who is typically accessing those servers, and in what time backups are conducted, so they can set up monitoring and verifications that everything works fine. Next slide, please. The second typical problem from the cybersecurity perspective of you that we or our clients faced with is when the secondary site is not as good protected as a main site. So when an incident happens and client have to migrate to secondary site while the main is under attack or something happened, the secondary site is very easily breached because there were not enough protection, or it was skipped from pen test, or policies are not on their place, or security solutions not as good as on main site. This is a typical problem because it is affected by lack of budget or hardware unusability, or when backup site works a long time, it can has outdated hardware, software, and so on. Why to use like new hardware and spend money if it is not utilized for 100%? So this is the reason why it can happen. How to mitigate this problem? First of all, the secondary site must be protected as good as main site. It's simple point, but if you purchase like a cluster of firewalls, NGFV firewalls, or WAF solutions, the secondary site must have the same security solutions with the same security policies, because attackers will find like the weakest point in your infrastructure and easily breach secondary site. Then everything have to be synchronized and tested. When you conduct pen test or assessment and so on, secondary site have to be assessed and pen tested the same way as main site is, because there always can be some misconfigurations or mistakes while adopting main security policies to backup site and so on. And how to verify this, that everything works fine? I already mentioned some of them. First of all is assessment. Second is pen tests. And the third one is monitoring. It's a regular verification that secondary site receives all the necessary policies in time, everything is updated synchronously, and that software is updated on the secondary side the same manner as it is on a main site. Next slide, please. The third problem that our clients faced with, and I saw in disaster situations, is not synchronized main and the backup site, and hard-coded credentials or objects or assets in security policies and other policies that have to be started on the backup side. What does it mean? It means that let's look at a typical firewall configuration. The problem starts from there mostly. Policy is created with hard-coded IP addresses. Then it is copied to backup site, and when something happens, main site is shuts down and backup site is starting to work. But due to hard-coded assets and hard-coded IP addresses, nothing works because backup site has another naming policies, another networks, and those backup servers that already spinned up in a backup site can communicate with firewall because firewall has different gateway IP addresses. So this problem happens on different security solutions or even different network devices on different application and web servers. So it is a typical problem. So how to mitigate this problem? First of all, of course, is verification, which is the third point. So when the policy is moving from main site to backup site, it have to be adopted, or it can be templated. What do I mean under templating? I mean that policy don't have to be to contain hard-coded assets. They have to be switched to assets that are on a backup site while moving. Or there is like another way when you can use assets domain names and secondary domain server, which is located on a backup site, will resolve to another IP addresses. But it also a buggy approach, so the better way is to use templating. When a single policy is generated for a main site, and it is filled with assets that are related to main site. And when the same policy generated from a template for a secondary site, it is filled with assets that are related to the secondary site. How to verify that this approach is working for you? First of all is, of course, tests. So the secondary site is always have to be tested on whether it's working or not, whether is everything functioning and users can reach your systems and your staff can work with the internal systems. The next point is, of course, monitoring. You have to verify that when policies are changed, they also synchronously changed on a backup site, and of course they are working. They not only must change, but they must work. Next slide, please. And a fourth typical problem that we see, it's communications problem. When main site breached or down for some reasons, majority of companies have also shut down their main communication channels, main communication solutions, like Skype for Business, which is located only on main site. But when main site is down, no one can reach no one. And we also saw a few situations when no one also have a mobile phone of his colleagues. So house starts and no one can communicate with no one. How to, and of course there is also a possibility that if main site is breached, attackers can like intercept your communications and modify those communications while obtaining access to Exchange server or Skype server or something like that. There are a few approaches to how to mitigate this risk. First of all, use cloud services to conduct communications between team members, like we did it. We switched to Teams, which is cloud-based solution. Then, of course, all staff, all team members have to have a backup or secondary communication channel like mobile phones or instant messengers, secure instant messengers, and so on. And how to verify that your team can do this? The first which comes to mind is simulation. You can send a notification for all of your team members that like main security channel is compromised and some sort of tasks have to be conducted, and then walk through how everyone reached another team members, how they communicated, and what were the problems, and then try to fix those problems. Next slide, please. Now let's summarize all of those problems and define what is the approach on solving them. First of all, you have to analyze risks for your infrastructure, for your company, from cybersecurity point of view. Typically, it's called a threat model. So you must know what are the risks, what are the weak points, and how attackers can reach your infrastructure, how they can breach you. And when you switch to backup side, also you must know what are the weak points, what problems you may face with. Then, when you understand all the risks for your main and backup infrastructure, you have to implement mitigation. First of all, of course, you have to create a mitigation plan and then implement solutions that will mitigate those risks or compensate those risks. Of course, when a disaster happens or you immediately have to switch to another site or even recover from backup site, there is a high possibility of mistakes, errors, miscommunications. Everything must be done very fast. So consider using automation. Automation is much better than 10 engineers that working hard day and night when disaster happens. And of course, a testing step when all solutions, all policies, or all automations have to be tested because if something can break, it will break when you most need it. So this is a small framework on how to find risks and how to find solutions to mitigate those risks. And on the next slide, we gathered typical questions that you must answer while creating your BCP plan for your organization from a cybersecurity perspective of view. So answering these questions, you may find typical problems that company may face with and like solve them before they happened. So use this checklist as a cheat sheet for while planning your BCP or even planning your cybersecurity. Thank you for your attention. Back to you, Glenn. We can't hear you right now.
We are fortunate today to have Infopulse's CIO, Mr. Oleksandr Pronkin, who has agreed to participate in the live interview. Hello and welcome, Oleksandr.
Hi, Glenn. Hi, everyone.
Oleksandr, I have a few deep dive type questions to help our audience better understand your experience during the BCP initiative. So if you're ready, let me go ahead with the first question.
Yeah.
So what was the driving force behind the company's massive hybrid migration?
Thanks for your question. If we are back in 2014, after the first Russian invasion, our executive management team considered potential risks for the company and decided to take preventive actions and secure our Ukrainian-based services. In 2016, we launched the preparation and rollout to company-wide business continuity procedure. A solid disaster recovery plan had to be a part of this business continuity plan in our company. Because of the scale of this project, it was divided into two parts. The first one lasted from 2016 to 2019 and covered only on-premise services and solutions. At this stage, the disaster recovery plan was geo-distributed setup for all Tier 1 production services. And our team implemented an always-on application scenario for these services. But its scenario was covered only the critical production services in the company. If we are talking about second stage, this stage is more interesting. The second stage since 2019, it was all about cloud solutions and creating a high availability hybrid infrastructure for the company. This version of disaster recovery plan included complex security assessment across all of our business units in Infopulse company and creating infrastructure architecture with hybrid scenario in mind. Also, we have an interesting experience. This disaster recovery plan helped us to cope with the massive shift to work from home during the coronavirus pandemic, which started in 2012. Probably
Okay.
it's the main driving force.
So can you tell me, how do you ensure the quality of the disaster recovery service?
Yes. If we are talking about pre-war period, assure quality. No, okay. We maintain the quality of the disaster recovery plan. We use real-time monitoring system. It's two different systems which located in different clusters and have a separate network for the system for all of our services and backups. And these two independent monitoring system resilience all of disaster recovery sites. And while they set up a system which called Screwed Up, this system allows us to have a company-wide infrastructure overview. And the entire infrastructure is covered with 24/7 monitoring. In case of incidents, the monitoring team is timely alerted with the automated notification. And also, I should tell you about the change management, because it is an important part for ensure the quality. All of the changes across the corporate environment were carefully planned and tested and implemented according to the procedure. Each service has comprehensive documentation, which they analyze during the change. And Infopulse internal processes are built within the ITIL version, ITIL 4 framework. And we are using all of this for our disaster recovery service.
Okay, so my next question is, what challenges did you meet during your migration?
We meet a lot of challenges. But if you know, every migration or major change leads to developing your expertise when you face new challenges and need to evaluate your approach carefully. Sometimes the migration needs to be supported by an extensive information campaign to onboarding the end users and share with them the advantages of the transformation. Also, it is crucial to to optimize license usage, since the difference in cost can be very significant. As for Infopulse, one of the biggest challenge was the company size. The company has more than 2,300 specialists across the multi-locations. The migration projects became too big to handle at once. And that's why we decided to decompose it into the two parts, which I described earlier. And it was helped us complete this project successfully.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, time is starting to get a little bit short. I did have some other questions for you, but I would like to see very quickly if the audience has any questions that they'd like to ask. Let me see if there are any questions in our chat window. And I don't see any at this time. Does anybody from the audience have a quick question they'd like to ask the team? Well, if not, I will go ahead and wrap up our presentation. I would like to thank you for attending today's webinar, and I hope you found it useful. Below are some contact information if you would like to discuss your specific needs further or are seeking additional guidance from an organization who has plenty of real-world experience. We can provide not only security assessments and consultation, but can also offer full security oversight via our Security Operations Center. Please let us know if you're interested in a discovery call with one of our experts. You'll also notice that I have my work email address included as part of this information package. Please feel free to use that, and I can help you connect with the right expert to answer your questions. The other thing I'd like you to notice is over on the right-hand side of this screen, you will see a number of links, and these links will take you to more detailed information related to our security topics and services here at Infopulse. And with that, I will conclude the webinar, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, team.